We are. We had a statement of, that's what we are. Sadi Dal 94a. Tie down off on the bottom of the page, right by the simon. So we had a statement. Yes. We're good. No, we're good. So we had a statement of Rav Huna that basically said that when you come to buy something, right, and you're sifting through the flour, you pay the guy. Sorry, you're sifting through all the flour, and it turns out in your measurement of flour or produce that you're buying, you find more than a fourth of a kav of dirt and something which you don't want as part of your produce. So Rav Huna said that you can get a full refund. You can get a full refund. And we explained either one of two ways. Either because that's logical, that, a regular fourth of a kav, people are willing to, forgo on. But more than that, they're not. So therefore, you have to reimburse them for everything. Or it's actually a punishment on the seller. It's called a knas. We penalize him because the fact that, we assume that he mixes, there's so much here, it could be that he mixed it in together, and therefore he gets penalized. So now we're going to have a whole bunch of cases that are going to be asking on Rav Huna. And all the questions are basically going to have a case where somebody bought something and it wasn't exactly the way he wanted. And now you either have to return everything, and it's going to be a support to Rav Huna, or you only have to return some things, and it's going to be a rebuttal on Rav Huna. So the first of those is the bottom of the Amud. We're just starting, Steve, don't worry. Meisvei. So we say by the halacha of kilayim, we know that you can't mix certain things together, and you can't graft them and plant them. So kol sa sheish barova mimin acher yimait. So if you're planting a certain measurement, and it has a rova, another fourth of a kav, another fourth of a measurement of another product. So you're planting one seed, and you have less than a fourth of another seed that's there. So is that a problem of kilayim? So says the Gemara, it is a problem of kilayim, and therefore you have to be yimait. You have to lessen the other seed in order that we're not going to consider this a mixture. So right now our threshold is a rova. If you do less than a rova, you're good to go. And if you do more than a rova, so then you are in kilayim trouble. That's not good. So the Gemara says now, this threshold of a rova, savruhu, the rova de kilayim is kiyoser me rova de hacha. So the common denominator is, in kilayim right now, we're assuming that a rova, a fourth of a kav, is the threshold. That more than that, we consider it a mixture, and a mixture is prohibited to plant. So in our case, where you're selling something, it's the same as more than a fourth of a rova. Meaning in our sales, what was our threshold? It was a rova, a fourth of a kav. More than that, it's considered already, that's going to be a nullified sale, and you get all your money back. So the Gemara says, look, in each threshold, we force you to lessen it. When it comes to kilayim, if rova is the threshold, just lessen it. Make sure you have less than that other plant. So too by us, the kaitani yimait. So too by us, just lessen it. Meaning, why when Rav Huna has more than a fourth of a kav in his, when the seller sells something, it has more than a fourth of a kav of soil and of rocks, the pebbles. Why does Rav Huna make the guy give the whole thing back? Just lessen it. Take away the amount that's more than a fourth. Get to your threshold of a fourth, and that's it. And maybe you'll get a few dollars back. But why is the halacha that you get all your money back and the whole thing's a nullified sale? That's the Gemara's kasha. So the Gemara says, "Lo, really, rova de kilayim, really a fourth of a kav of kilayim is like a rova. Really, it's not that it's like more than a rova. Really, it's like a rova. Just like by our rova, a fourth of a kav is good. So to by kilayim, actually a fourth of a kav is also good. That's not the threshold yet." Says the Gemara, if that's not the threshold, then why are you lessening it? the Mishnah said you have to lessen it. You might. Says the Gemara, you might. Why, when you have that amount of another plant that you're planting in your field, you have to now lessen from that plant if it's the same as a rova in our case of a sale, so then that's not the threshold yet, that's prohibited. So says the Gemara, no, it's mishum chumra de kilayim. You're right. So basically there's a machlokas here. The measurement called a rova of kilayim, is that already the threshold that's prohibited? Or is that a chumra, that's a stringency? So at first we thought it was the threshold, and we said you have to lessen it. Then we had a kasha. So too here we're saying ihachi amai you might. If a rova is prohibitively allowed, is biblically allowed, so why does the Mishnah say you have to lessen the amount? That the Gemara says no, it's only a chumrah, mishum chumrah de kilayim. Okay, it's a chumrah that looks very similar. It's very close together. This little amount of another plant prohibited, a little less than that permitted. It's too close together. Chumrah de kilayim. So when you have a rova of kilayim, we're strict upon you and make you lessen it. Ihachi, if that's true, turning the page. So ihachi, look at the ladder. Ema seifa, look at the latter part of that price of that. The Mishnah? Of that Mishnah, yeah. What does the latter part of that Mishnah say? Ema seifa, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Yivor. Which means you have to remove the whole thing. Not just, lessen, you have to remove the whole thing. So now, the first opinion of the Mishnah, we have one of two ways of understanding. Either the Mishnah told us you have to lessen from a rova because that's the law, or you lessen from a rova because that's a stringency. Two understandings. If Rabbi Yossi comes and says, remove the whole thing. So which one of the first understandings fits better in contrast to Rabbi Yossi, who says you have to remove the whole thing? So Iyamers Bishlama ki Yosir Merova Tinofes Dami, if a rova by kilayim is like more than a rova by sales, that you've hit the threshold and it's prohibited, so then I understand. B'ha miflagi Tanakam asavar lo kansinan hetera atu isura Rabbi Yossi savar kansinan. So if you tell me that the rova is the threshold and you're not allowed to, the law is you can't have more than a rova is the amount that's the maximum of another plant that you could have. So then it's very good. Tanakama says, listen, make sure you lessen your other plant enough that it's less than a rova. And Rabbi Yossi says, and the reason why Tanakama didn't make you remove the whole thing, because under the rova is permitted. More than a rova is prohibited. So just remove the prohibited amount. We didn't punish you for the permitted amount also. We just told you to remove the prohibited amount. Rabbi Yossi was much more strict. He said, kansinan, we're punishing you, we're giving you a penalty. You planted something which is not allowed, remove the whole thing. So that's only good if the first opinion understood it to mean that a rova is not allowed. The law is that a rova is not allowed. But kirova dummy, if really a rova is allowed, and it's just a chumrah, it's just a stringency to get less than a rova, so then what is Rabbi Yossi arguing about? Rabbi Yossi says you have to remove the whole thing. Right? So I tell you, this is the amount that's prohibited biblically, make sure you lessen it. So Rabbi Yossi says, make sure you take away the whole thing. We penalized you. You're too close to the Isser. That's understandable. But if a rova is not even prohibited biblically, it's already a stringency. So Rabbi Yossi is coming and adding a stringency upon a stringency and telling you to remove the whole thing. What's the logic behind that? Why is he so strict? Why are you removing the whole thing? Says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Yossi tells you, the reason why Rabbi Yossi is adding a stringency upon a stringency is because a chumrah upon a chumrah is easier. So a chumrah upon a chumrah, he's so strict with you, is because this looks very similar to being mekayim kilayim, to keeping prohibited mixtures together. You have two different plants, and you haven't technically hit the amount that's considered prohibited enough to be considered a mixture, but because it looks so similar, like you are Mechzi kilayim. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi says remove the whole thing. Yeah. So that's the logic of Rabbi Yossi. So at the end of the day, we brought this Bryce as a challenge to Rav Huna that says you don't have to remove the whole thing, just remove a little bit. And on that we said, no, really, it's not the same as Rav Huna. It was really just a stringency, but it wasn't the actual law. Okay, another question on Rav Huna. We're going through a lot of random parts of Shas to ask on Rav Huna. So that was Kilayim, and now we go to above Mציעא. So Tashma Shnaim Shefkidu Eitel Echad Zemana v'Zemasayim. So Steve and myself decided to deposit some money with Jules. I give Jules, either 100 or 200, and Steve gives either 100 or 200. And now we start fighting, right? Who gives Jules 200? I say I give 200, and Steve says he gave 200. So what's the halacha? So Ze Omer Masayim Shali says the 200 is mine. Is there no Masayim Shali? No, the 200 is mine. So no sin lazemana v'lazemana. Jules has to give back to us each $100. So the hashar, but there's 300 total deposited. 100 is being fought over, right? Because we each for sure gave 100. That third 100 is that third 100 remains by Jules until Eliyahu Navi comes. And that way Jules is going to be diving from Mashiach much harder. Yeah. So says the Gemara. So he says, what do you see? That you don't, the guy that's a trickster, right? He still gets back 100. He just loses out 100. He doesn't lose out the whole thing. According to Rav Huna, if you put too much soil and too much rocks in your sail, Allah says you lose the whole thing. So, especially according to the understanding that we punish you, right? According to Rav Huna, there was two understandings. Either it's logical or it's a punishment. So for sure here, how come it sounds like the trickster getting rewarded? He should get punished for the whole thing. Now, it's a funny question because how do you know who the trickster is? Like, wait, so what do you? And that's the Gemara's answer, but the question was interesting. Haki Hasha says the Gemara, these are not comparable. Hasam vade manalamar umanalamar. For sure, 100 goes to each guy. They for sure gave you 100. But here, Hacha mi yemar delav kule eruve ariv. So the Gemara makes the following. I mean, I guess you could have asked who's the trickster, and then why should the innocent guy lose out? So but the Gemara says, in this case, we both gave 100 for sure. So why should one guy lose out his 100 that he for sure is owed? In our case, when there's more than this amount of soil, so part of the idea that if you learn that Rav Huna is a punishment is because we can assume this guy mixed together, right? He wanted to sell a presentable amount of flour, so he wanted to fill up his package, but so he snuck in the bottom a whole bunch of soil and rocks to make the bag look heavier and the bag look more full. So he said it could be, but mi yemer delav kule aruv arib. There's a good chance there that it was the seller that filled it up, and therefore we punished him, as opposed to here, the trickster's only a trickster on the last 100, but on that first 100, it really belongs to him. So why should we punish him for the amount that's really owed to him? Hashma from the latter part of what we just said, miseifa. On that latter part of what we just said, Rabbi Yossi imkain ma hipsid haramai, says Rabbi Yossi the other way now. He argues and he said, if that's true, then what did the trickster lose? Everyone's going to go deposit money by somebody, claim more, and get back. Meaning he's not punished at all. I'm going to keep giving $100 a deposit, claim 200, and get my 100 back. That's great. And maybe one day I'll get my 200 back, if the guy is gullible enough. So says Rabbi Yossi, my hifsid haramai. What did the trickster lose out? Says Rabbi Yossi, very strict. Ela hakol yehemunach hachavu Eliyahu. The entire amount, all 300, remains by Jules until Eliyahu Navi comes. That way, even though I guess the innocent person loses out, but we're going to prevent tricksters in society. Every time they're going to claim and then lie about it. So then, now remember, if it's really yours, they can bring witnesses, right? They can always bring witnesses to prove that it's theirs. So one should always lend with witnesses and get paid back with witnesses. Oh, so it says, but what do you see here? That everyone loses out. So this sounds like a support for Rav Huna, that everyone loses out. So to Rav Huna, when the guy puts so much soil in his product, so therefore everybody, we punish him for the whole thing. So it's by having to return the whole, all the flour, and the guy gets all the money back. So says the Gemara, no, it's not a support to Rav Huna. Why? By that case, it's for sure a trickster. So when you punish and put all 300 away, you know for sure that one of the guys is a trickster, and for sure he's getting punished. By our case, mi yemar de rubi arib, it's like it's backwards. That's now the other side of the logic. You want to assume the guy maybe filled the whole, his part with soil, but you don't know for sure. There is a chance that it got there on its own somehow when the product was picked, or at some point in the packing process, too much dirt got in there. You can't say for sure 100% the guy's a trickster. So therefore, both the beginning and the latter part of that price, it cannot be an attack or a proof to Rav Huna. Tashma. Now we're going to interest, ribis. Shtar sheish baribis. So you write up a document saying, I'm going to lend you $100 and you're going to pay me back $150. It's a shtar that has interest on it. It's a document that has interest. So what do we do? Konsino so ve'eno gova lo es keren below es ha ribis. Divrei Rabbi Meir. You make up a document with interest on it. We punish you that you can't collect anything. Not the principal and not the interest. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So what do you see? It's another support to Rav Huna. When someone's doing something that's has too much soil, too much pebbles in his product, we should punish him and take everything away, and the guy has to give back all the money. So that sounds just like Rav Meir. Says the Gemara, no. Hachi hashta, hasam mishas k'tiva huda avidle shuma, hacha miyevar de rubi arib. So same as before. There, from the inception of the document, from the time you wrote the document, you are doing like a bad evaluation. You're adding interest into the document. Therefore, you get punished. You get penalized. But here, when the seller is selling his flour, you could say for sure that he put in the soil and he put in the rocks. So just because you hold that by a document of interest, you get punished, but not necessarily would you say that by Rav Huna's case, where you have a bunch of flour that has too much soil in it, you can't say for sure you would punish the guy. Because once again, we don't know for sure the guy mixed in all the soil and the rocks. We're assuming, but we don't know for sure. So, Tashma miseifa. Okay, what about the latter part of that statement? The Chachamim omrim goves keren, the ena goves ribis. The Chachamim are much more lenient. They say we only penalize them for the part that's prohibited, but the part that's actually lent, that money you can collect. The lender can collect. So say the same by our case. A rova, under a rova, you're allowed to have in your sale. That's normal. Dirt comes into the fruits, spoiled fruits. Every 10 apples you get a spoiled apple. That's not a bad package. So why don't you just penalize the guy for the part that was prohibited? So take away whatever's more than a rova, that extra amount of soil and rocks. Remove that. Do the calculation. Instead of giving all $100 back for the flour, he'll give you back $5-10 for the part that's prohibited, and just be mamait, just lessen take away the prohibited part. Says the Gemara, no, haki hashta, hasam vadai karna de heterehu. When it comes to the document with all the ribis, with all the interest, if it's let's say the document's $150, $100 you loaned and you want $100 back, that's mutter. When you wanted $150 back, that extra 50 is for sure usser. So we let you keep your 100 because that 100 is nothing wrong with it. It was never, nothing foul with it. It was just you put in this document $50 of interest. That part's bad. But here in our case, Hacham mi yemar de kule lo erube arib. But could you say that the whole thing wasn't mixed over here? Meaning, we never know for sure when this flour or this product has a lot of soil in it, too much, more than a rove of a kav of soil. So if it has that much, so what do you want to say? He mixed in a little bit, but he mixed in the whole thing. If you think the seller was messing with this product, you're assuming he put in all the soil. You don't assume, well, there was, one rotten apple and he put a second rotten apple in it, right? You're assuming that if he messed it up, he messed up the whole thing. That's why if you're going to penalize him, then you penalize him for everything. So, it's more strict. So it's more strict in the case of a loan document when you have 100, which is mutter, and 50, which is usr. So basically, we're going back and forth over here. If you can tell me that we're going to penalize him for the whole thing, so then we're going to respond, well, here he's not for sure a trickster. And if you're going to bring me a proof that you only penalize somebody for a little bit, so then we'll say, what do you mean? Here he is a trickster. So we're going back and forth how to view this guy, how to view this salesman of Rav Huna. Okay, Tashma. Okay, this is coming up in about a week and a half. So basically, you sell somebody a plot of land, a base core, and a base core has 30 sa in a base core. Okay, 30 sa, and basically you spoke out. I'm selling you this amount, a little more, a little less. So now, what's the new threshold over there? So there, the Mishnah says a little more, a little less. So the Mishnah there says that the Mishnah says, yeah. If you say base core offer ani mocherlach, so then if you spoke out im amar hein chaser hein yeser, a little more, a little less. So it says the Gemara, afilu piches rova lasa, o hoser rova lasa higiu. If you speak out, I'm selling you this 30 sa piece of land, base core 30 sa, but I tell you a little more, a little less. What's the new threshold? The new threshold is that if you have a fourth of a kav per sa, right? So you have 30 sa. So now if you've increased more than a fourth of a sa, or if you've lessened it, within a fourth of a sa, it's a good sale. We don't say it's a bad sale. So imagine you have I'm telling you I don't know how many feet are an acre. And let's say a football field, you have 100 yards, right? 100 yards of a football field. I'm telling you a 100-yard field, a little more, a little less, right? So I'm going to get confused with my calculations. And how many feet are in a yard? We have six. How many feet? 3 feet in a yard. So now imagine the new threshold is, whatever. If it's 1 foot more, 1 foot less per yard, it's a good sale, right? Then the field. But let's say you've done much more than that, or much less than that. So instead of selling him, a base core which is 30 sa, so instead of lessening per sa a fourth of a kav, you gave him much less land, or you gave him way more land. So that's going to be a bad sale. So let's see it inside now. Tashma the Tani Ravin by Rav Nachman. So he says, Loa samoser bilvadhu maxir, ella maxir lo es kol haravayin kulan. So if you've increased it by too much, or you've lessened it by too much, the halacha is you have to give back all of the fourths of a kav that you cheapen this guy on. Meaning, a base core has 30 sa, so each sa has kavs there, has a number of kavs. So that means for each sa you have 30 sa. For each sa you have to give back that which you took away from the guy. So elamaxilo as kol haravayin kulam. Give him back all the fourths of a kav that you, so to speak, ripped him off on. So what do you see from there? Alma heicha debayi ahadure kulam ahader. For each part of a sa that the guy got ripped off on. So meaning, let's say you have a base score of 30 sa. So if you lessen the guy a certain amount of land, you can take it off from the top, right? You could say, okay, as a base core, it's 30 sa. This amount he didn't give me, so I have to give back, and I have to give back the amount, the amount of land that really he's owed. But we're saying now that you look at each one of the 30 sa individually, and for each one of those sa, you return the amount that's missing. So if in each, if it's 3 feet per yard, So instead of giving back the total, a total of feet of land back, you go to each yard and you have to add a foot to that yard. That's how you do the calculations. But what do you see when you rip the guy off too much? You have to return everything, all the revine, all the fourths of a saw. Alma kol heicha debaya dure kule mahader. You have to return the whole thing, and that's going to be a support to Rav Huna. Says the Gemara, Hochi has to turn the page, not so fast. There you said, Hasam, Hein Chaser, Hein Yasser Amarle. There you spoke it out. You said, if I give you a little more, I'll give you a little bit less. So only that amount a guy was willing to forgo on. But more than a certain amount, Mihu Revia. So therefore, Mihu Revia lo Chashiv. But Yeser Mirevia Chashiv. Since you spoke out, I'm selling you a piece of land. A little more, a little less. So the guy's expecting, if it's a little more, a little less, that he's going to forgo on that. He's going to be fine with that. A little more than a 30 sa, I'm happy with. A little less, I'm happy with. But if you do more than that given amount, but Yasser Mirevia Chashiv, that's very significant already. So some skip the next line because it doesn't really make sense, and they go to the word Vahadra. So we'll read it for the sake of reading it, but I believe many skip it. The cave in the Chazil Tzirufe Betisha Kav and Havile Ara Kashi was about Benafshe Vahadra. So skip that line. So what it means is more than a revi already is chashiv, and therefore you return it. When you speak out that you're selling a base core of land, a little more, a little less, so then there's a leeway. You've made a leeway in your sale. I'm selling you a pound, a little more, a little less. Okay, so it's a little more than a pound, a little less than a pound. But more than that is already considered very significant. And if it's very significant, then you have to return everything. As opposed to our case, with our flour that has a little too much soil in it. So one second. Okay. Yeah, our case, he never spoke out, a little more, a little less. So then, even though he didn't speak out a little more, a little less, we assume a person generally mochel. He generally forgoes less than a fourth of a kav, because it's very common to have a little dirt and a little soil in the flour and the produce, but right. Meaning, basically, the difference is when you sell a field, a base core, and you speak out a little more, a little less, we assume you have a threshold of how much you're willing to forego. Up until this point, you're willing to forego. More than that, I want my money back, and the guy has to return to you all the, all the land that's missing or all the money. But you could say that by the case of Rav Huna, you could still disagree with Rav Huna. Why? Because when you buy produce, where's the threshold of how much a person is willing to forego on? Why is more than a fourth of a kav the new threshold? A person could argue maybe that amount, maybe that amount could just be given back to the person. Meaning, Rav Huna said if you have more than a fourth of a kav, it's a bad sale. You have to return the whole thing. But just because in the case of a base core, he has to return to you everything that he has to return to you all the land that he owed you. But over here, maybe all he has to return to you is that little amount that you're unhappy with. But the general sale you are happy with. So the difference would be by a base score, you're only happy to a certain point. After that, then you want everything back. But over here, one could argue, you don't want it to be no good of a sale. You just want the little extra soil to be gone, but you don't want the whole sale to be null and void. Right. So the Rashbam points out that by a field, it's not the derech. It's not common to have, more than 30 sa for a base core. It's not so common to have more than that. So if the guy has too much more than that, so he can ask for his money back. Or if the guy gives way less than that, then it could be a bad sale. But by the case of soil, so it happens sometimes that there's too much soil in the produce. So you can't say for sure a guy is willing to, you can't say 100% that a guy is willing to that the deal should be null and void. Because at the end of the day, when a guy buys produce, it could be that it's common to have soil in it, more than a fourth of a kav. So Rav Huna said it's a bad sale. But we're arguing now who said it's a bad sale. Maybe you could disagree with Rav Huna and say that it's just that little amount you don't want, but the rest of the produce you do want, and that would be the difference between the base core and our sale. So, okay, next kasha. Let's see, Tashma, the regular case of over and undercharging. General rule is the following: Ha'ona, pakos mishtos nikne mekach, yoser mishtos batal mekach, shtos kano machzirona. The general rule is if you overcharge for a sixth, so then if it's less than a sixth, it's a good sale. If it's more than a sixth, so what happens? The sale is null and void. If you undercharge exactly a sixth, so then if it's exactly a sixth, so then the sale is good, and the buyer or seller has to return a sixth. So if let's say the seller overcharged, you overcharged by a sixth. He sells you a product, it comes out that really he overcharged. If he overcharged you more than a sixth, sale's null and void. If he overcharged you less than a sixth, we assume a person foregoes on that, and it's a good sale. If he overcharges you exactly a sixth, it's a good sale, but he has to return to you that amount. That sixth that he overcharged you has to be returned. So what do you see from there? Shmamina kol heicha debayla hadure kula mahader. So what do you see from this case? You see that the entire sixth was overcharged, right? And what do? You return the entire amount that was unfair, the entire sixth. So too, if you have dirt and soil in a sale, that's like Rav Huna. The whole thing is null and void. You have to return the whole thing. It's a bad sale. Meaning Rav Huna said it's a bad sale, but we're just pointing out that since which part is bad by Rav Huna? The bad part is the soil and the rocks that's in your produce. So we don't start saying, well, part of the soil you'll forego on, and the other half of the soil, we'll return the money to you. All the soil, all the part that you really didn't pay for, that whole thing is going to be returned. So that's just like Rav Huna. Just like Rav Huna said that the whole thing is not good. There's too much soil in here. So too over here, that whole sixth that you were cheated on, the whole thing gets paid back. The difference is that for Rav Huna, the whole sale is null and void. Right? He says when you have more than a fourth of a rova of soil and of rocks, then the whole sale is null and void. Here we're just pointing out that the part that was cheated, that whole part gets returned. Meaning we don't split up that part. So it's similar to Rav Huna in the fact that, since you have all the soil is there, right? We don't start splitting it up. Half the soil I forgo on, and the other half I'm strict about. All of that gets returned. Yeah. So this should be a proof to Rav Huna that we don't start splitting it up. Less than a fourth of soil you're happy with. Just give back a little bit. No, if there's more than a fourth of a soil there, then you have to give back the whole thing. So to here, if there's more than if there's a sixth, you give back the whole thing. Okay, so says the Gemara, not so fast. Hachi hashta, are they really comparable? What's the difference between the case of overcharging and our case? The difference is hasami kara shava b'shava. Amarle miu pachos mishtos lo yedia b'mana umachal. 1 second. Haki hashta hasami kara shava b'shava amarle. That there, in our case of over undercharging, originally the seller told the buyer, I'm selling you this product for it's worth $20, and I'm selling it to you for $20. But then it turns out that that's not really true. It was either, $18 or $22 or $24. So miu pachos mishtos lo yadia. He didn't know it was really worth less than a sixth. So b'mana umachil inish. And people are they forgo on that, whatever. Turns out it's $19, it's fine. I'll sacrifice that dollar. In actual shtus, if it was I overpaid a sixth, so then shtus yadiyah, that people know about, below machal inish, and they're not willing to forgo on. Yasser mishtus, if it turns out that it's really more than a sixth, I paid 20, it was worth only $12, $10. Yasser mishtus mekach tosu ubatal mekach. Then the whole thing is a bad sale. So 1 second. So what's the difference? In the case of over undercharging, in the case of over undercharging, really you should have to give back. At any point that you're under or overcharged for the product, you should have to return the amount. It just happens to be that less than a sixth people forgo on. But really, if you made up a deal that I'm selling you something for $20, so then, and it ends up being, it was $19, really you should be able to get your money back. But people forgo on that. But if it's going to be $16 now, $17, so for sure you should return the whole thing. You should return the amount that was over or undercharged, because that's what you made up originally with the guy. You made up that this is what we're selling it for. But in our case, it's not like that. In our case, you're buying a product, you don't know how much soil is in there. The buyer never told you, the seller never told you, I'm selling you, this much soil, this much flour with this much soil in it. Now the question is, how much people forgo on? They forgo on a lot. They're willing to forgo on a little bit. So just because you agree here, you give back the entire sixth, because that's how you made up the deal from originally. It's gonna be a $20 mug, and now it ended up being not that way. That's why you have to return the entire part that was over undercharged. By our case with the soil, it was never like that. That was never the deal. You went to buy flour, and it's very common that when you buy flour, there's dirt and soil inside the flour. So therefore, you could always say, okay, if the normal amount that people are strict upon is a fourth of a kav of soil, so just take the part that's more than a fourth of a kav, remove it from the flour, and pay back that difference. But you don't see that you have to take away all the soil now and pay back for the whole soil. So let's say you have, I don't know, just give an example for simplicity's sake. So you have a pound of flour. You find in the pound of flour, let's say you find a fourth of a kav and you paid $10 for this pound of flour, and you found more than a fourth of a kav, however it's going to work out measurement wise, of soil and rocks in your flour. So now, people usually less than a fourth, they're not makpid on, they're not tricked about, they forgo on that. But you found more than a fourth of a kav now. So you paid $10 for a pound of flour. You only got back, you didn't get a full pound of flour, because there's more than a fourth of a kav of dirt and pebbles in your flour. So what could you say? Just remove the amount of rocks and soil from the flour until the point that people generally forgo on. Let's say, 10 pebbles is people's, up until 10 pebbles, people can settle with. Once you have 10 pebbles, now they get very upset and they say, this is ridiculous. I'm never buying from you again, and they want their money back. So if you find 20 pebbles in your flour, remove 10. 10 is already past everyone's threshold. Then they throw a temper tantrum in Safeway. If it's more than, if it's more than 10 pebbles, then they're done. So just take away 10 pebbles. The other 10 pebbles, the seller could say, listen, this is normal. All flour vendors have, always between 0 and 10 pebbles in their flour. So therefore, you could always say that for Rav Huna's case, you don't have to agree to Rav Huna. Rav Huna said all the pebbles get taken out. If you have more than a fourth of a kav, then you have to get your money back for the whole thing, because nobody wants, either nobody wants to have to now sort through that many pebbles. And once you're making the guy sort through all these pebbles, then he's not going to stop at 10. He's going to get down to 0, and therefore that's way too much than what he paid for. Or you hold a Rav Huna, it's like a punishment. But why does every flour vendor have only up to 10 pebbles? And and Mr. Cheater here has 20 pebbles in his flour. Obviously, you're a trickster. You're trying to make up for your lost amount of flour. So we punish you. But either way, just because you agree that by a sixth, you give back the entire sixth that was over or undercharged, does not mean that you have to agree to Rav Huna. You could always say, I'll only remove the amount of pebbles from your flour that people until a person's threshold. So I'll remove up to 10 pebbles. Once I'm down to 10 pebbles, so then I could still disagree with Rav Huna and stop right there. Rav Huna would say you have to take away all the pebbles. But just because I agree by a sixth, you have to give back the whole sixth, does not mean that I would agree to Rav Huna. One more. Tashma hamekabel sada mechavero. I received the field from you to plant, lita, to plant. I raised a makabel alav eser borios lamea. You gave me 100 trees. The problem is 10 of those trees are barren. So a place with 100 trees, and 10 trees are barren. I guess it's either before you planted the trees, or it's or it's when the trees are already there. I'm not sure, but it turns out that these 10 of the 100 trees don't grow. They don't grow fruit. So now, what do we say? Okay, that's normal. 10 to 100, that's normal. Yoser mikan, if 11 trees ready, one more tree is barren. So then megal levis hakol. That's already similar to Rav Huna. If 11 trees are barren, then the whole thing is no good, and you want your money back. Why? Amar Rav Huna, brother of Yeshua, kol yeser mikan is kibalita mitchila dami. When it comes to 11 trees already, if you have 11 trees, so the guy now, for some reason, 11 is a magic number, right? 11 barren trees, we view it as if he has to go plant a new field. If it's 10 to 100, okay, really you sold him a field of trees. 10 happen to be barren, but okay. When you have 11 already, so that's like the guy has to now replant the whole brand new field. 11 is that number. So therefore, if the guy sold you 11 barren trees, you can get all your money back, because we don't view it as he sold you only one more tree than 10, one more than 10. Rather, he actually we view it like its own unique section, and the owner has to now replant the entire field of trees. The next part is one of these like back and forth gemaras that goes on, back and forth for a lot.